Dun 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 dun
We
dun.
lost each other.
What's going on, guys? I'm Chris. Welcome back to another video, a big video, one that I have been meaning to do for quite some time now. It's been almost 2 years since I've ranked all the MCU movies. I'm doing this with my lovely lady friend Cam.
It's been 2 years?
It's been damn near 2 years, I'd say. But with Black Widow hitting theaters in July and Shang-Chi just hitting theaters this weekend, we decided, hey, we've never done an MCU ranking together. Might as well do it. No, not in a video form.
I don't have a good enough memory to
No, we have never done this. This is the first. I'm excited. Before we give you guys our ranking, definitely hit the like button. Comment your ranking of the MCU movies down below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Without further ado, we're going to take turns going from 25 to 1. We're not going to count the TV shows. All right, so I'm going to go first, but if we share the same movie, feel free to speak up and we can just talk about it together. So coming in last place for me is going to be Thor: The Dark World. Is that your last as well?
No.
Wow. Thor: The Dark World's at the bottom for me simply because it's the most bland, forgettable, and just sad MCU movie that exists. You have Chris Hemsworth as Thor. Do more with him. Terrible villain. Bland movie. Don't want to waste my time talking about it anymore. What's your last place?
Mine's The Incredible Hulk because I don't remember it very well and I don't care to ever really watch it again.
That's actually my 24, The Incredible Hulk. It's just a movie that feels so far removed from the MCU. Simply because Edward Norton plays Bruce Banner instead of Mark Ruffalo, it just doesn't even feel like it's in the MCU tonally. I like Abomination as a villain. It's cool they're going to bring him back into the MCU. But overall, it's very forgettable compared to the rest of the MCU slate.
My number 24 is Thor: Dark World.
So we basically just flip-flopped our last two. Thor: Dark World is a snooze fest.
Yeah.
Coming in at number 23 for me is going to be Captain Marvel. Now, I know this is going to get a lot of heat in the comments, but it's just a very Phase 1 movie that came out in Phase 3. What I mean by that is, there's not a lot of life in this movie. You get to see Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. She does the best she can, but in my opinion, the character itself is not written the best. She's very just bland cardboard throughout. And some will argue that's the purpose of her character. We could make a whole video about that. I like Nick Fury and the second act of this movie a lot. That's the standout. But overall, the villain's extremely forgettable. The movie's just bland and falls flat. Like the final act, the action sequence, feels like something that would be the first act action sequence in a later MCU movie. Not a fan of it.
My number 23 is Thor.
Wow.
Not that it's bad. It's just nah. The thing for me about ranking the Marvel movies is like after top 10, it's like, do I care enough about Thor to watch it? Probably not. I love Thor, but
So next up for me is going to be Iron Man 2, and this one hurts because I truly do love Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, but the movie itself is a complete mess. It's trying to set up the Avengers, it's trying to bring in Whiplash and Justin Hammer, it's trying to do way too much in too little of time, and it becomes a thing that feels like studio interference. It does have a badass opening with Shoot to Thrill by AC/DC. Black Widow's entrance is iconic, but overall, it's just a lackluster, messy movie, even though I really think the suit up with him versus Whiplash is one of the better suit ups in the MCU.
my number 22 is Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Volume 2. To preface, I'll probably get hate for how low I have Guardians as well. I love the Guardians. Not the biggest fan of the movies. I think that's probably because I would say like the most outstanding part of the Guardians movies is the music. Like I think that's what makes people really, really enjoy it, and that's not the kind of music I listen to. I know it's good music. I have shit music taste. It's fine. I love the Guardians in like Infinity War.
So it's funny you mention that because Guardians 2 is actually next on my list, so I kind of just misled the audience there.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I did. So feel free to hit the dislike button. But Guardians 2, again, we jump around so much in the first 10 minutes. It's almost nauseating, in my opinion, the way that you're just jumping from location to location. They set up a bunch of different people that could be the villains in the movie, and then they don't show up until way later in the movie. I do like the relationship between Peter and his father, and there's some cool twists there. The soundtrack is banging, I will say. It always slaps in the Guardians movies. But Drax in this movie I find highly annoying. Mantis is highly irritating. And the Guardians get split up, so the team chemistry that really makes these movies pop in the first one is missing in this movie, and it just becomes really messy despite some cool third act moments. Guardians 2 just falls flat, and it's one that I rarely want to revisit in the MCU, unfortunately.
My 21 is Iron Man 3.
Okay.
I'm gonna be straight up. I'm not the biggest like Iron Man person. I love Tony Stark, but his movies are to me. Iron Man 3 is fine. doesn't provide me much.
Next up for me is actually Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think this movie gets a lot of hate unnecessarily because it's a lot of fun, especially at the time it came out. It was a nice little like vacation from the high stakes of Infinity War. It has a badass post-credit scene when we see everyone get snapped away and Scott's stuck in the quantum realm, which really enhances the stakes going into Endgame. This movie is just people chasing an object the entire time, which can be boring and feel meaningless to some people, but I think that it's a pretty cool movie and we get to see a lot of Jimmy Woo, so I'm not complaining.
My number 20 is Iron Man 2. The only reason it's there is because I like it a little bit more than Iron Man 3.
So next up for me is the first Thor, which I think has some redeemable moments, especially like the first 30 minutes when we get to see the fight with the Frost Giants. That's really cool. I think that's a cool battle. But, you know, other than that, it just becomes this fish out of water story we've seen a lot in movies in general. We get some funny bits with Thor, like Another, which has an awesome callback in Loki episode 3. But overall, Thor is another just middle-of-the-road MCU movie. Not one I'm going to want to go back and rewatch as much as the ones above it.
Number 19 is Captain Marvel. It's fine. I definitely do. I like it better than Chris, and I like her character more than Chris does. It's not like my go-to to rewatch, but like if I had to watch it, I wouldn't mind it. And Goose.
Goose is cool. I like Goose.
I have all 3 Goose Pops. They're sitting right over there.
Yeah, what a cute cat. So next up for me is Iron Man 3, and this movie made me infuriated the first time I ever saw it because of what they did with the Mandarin, casting Ben Kingsley in the role and promoting him as the main villain, and then they have a twist where he's just an actor named Trevor, and that really upset me at the time. But I think the MCU has made up for it, and I won't say exactly why. If you know, you know. That's all I'm gonna say. I will still say Aldrich Killian as a villain. Aldrich Killian as a villain. Aldrich Killian as the villain of the movie. Again, very one note. It's Guy Pearce just playing this villainous character who wants to destroy Tony Stark. We've seen it multiple times, so there's nothing fresh there. But as a character study on Tony Stark and seeing the trauma he had to go with after saving the world in Avengers, it works.
My next one is Spider-Man Far From Home. I simply do not like this movie. It's only above...
Surprised it's this high on your list. You always hate on it so much.
It's only above Captain Marvel because objectively it's more entertaining. I don't like this movie because it doesn't feel like a Spider-Man movie to me, but that's just a me thing. It's overwhelming with like the elementals, and then just kidding, it's not the elementals, it's Mysterio. Some of the humor in this movie just doesn't get me. Brad walking in on Peter, changing in front of that German lady or whatever.
Cringe.
It's just not for me.
A lot of cringe humor in this one. It's funny you mention it because Far From Home is actually next on my list.
Really?
A massive drop from the last MCU ranking. If someone wants to go back, it was damn near top 10 last time because it was right after the movie came out. It's arguably the worst Spider-Man movie. It still has a lot of moments I like and will defend. I will defend this movie because I think Mysterio as a villain is really clever and Jake Gyllenhaal's having so much fun in the role. Mm-hmm. And I still think there's a lot of great moments with Peter. The final fight he has with Mysterio, and then he goes and kills all the drones. Badass. A lot of this movie, again, like you were saying, cringe. It feels unnecessary. The whole entire sequence on the bus during the field trip, anticlimactic, I would say. A lot going on in that first hour that sets up a movie that we never get with the Elementals, with Night Monkey. It's the weaker of the 2 MCU Spider-Man movies by far.
Next for me is Ant-Man and the Wasp. I love Hope. She's one of my favorite female characters. Ant-Man and the Wasp is a good movie. I don't know how much I'd rewatch it. That's probably why it's lower.
It's one of the least rewatchable MCU movies.
It's fine.
Next up on my list is going to be Black Panther. I think it's solid. Best Picture nominee? Hell no, in my opinion. I like the story of Black Panther. Rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman, because he is and forever will be Black Panther / T'Challa. I love the relationship he has with Shuri in this movie and seeing their sibling relationship. Killmonger as a villain is good. A little overrated, but still a good villain in my opinion. And Black Panther is solid. Not one I personally go back and rewatch all the time. And M'Baku is a character I like as well. So there's a lot of great characters here. Seeing Wakanda, it's just a cool world to explore.
Next for me is Guardians of the Galaxy.
Wow.
It's just not my thing. If I ever do rewatch this movie, it's for Gamora because I love her. And I like her relationship with Peter Quill.
No love for Rocket.
I mean, I do. Like, you see, that's the thing. I like all the Guardians, but Baby Groot isn't even there. So, like, that's like half the appeal gone already. I mean that in the nicest way possible.
So next up on my list is Doctor Strange. And I know this might be really low for a lot of people out there. I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. It's not one I rewatch a lot, though. And rewatchability when I rank the MCU is huge for me. Seeing Stephen Strange's origin works for me very well. That was really hard to say. Stephen Strange's origin. The first scene where he goes astral, trippy as hell. In the theater as well, if I had seen that in IMAX, I probably would have gotten nauseous because of how visually stunning it is. The third act of the movie, when he gets stuck in the time loop, Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Clever, yes. But Caecilius is the main villain of this movie, I thought. And he is just had so much potential, bringing Mads Mikkelsen into the MCU, such a high caliber evil actor who can play such great villains. What's his plan? He wants to destroy the sorcerers and just take over? Like, again, I like when villains are fleshed out, and if you have a great villain, your movie's gonna be pretty high in the MCU. Doctor Strange is cool. It's a great origin piece. As a movie, it's good as well, but it's not as near as good as the ones above it, in my opinion. That's all I have to say about it.
Next for me is Age of Ultron. It was a lot lower, and then I think I rewatched it before WandaVision in preparation, and it moved up a little bit. I think it gets overhated as an Avengers movie.
Yeah, definitely does.
It's really good. I love Quicksilver, and I love movie Wanda, especially in Age of Ultron. I love Wanda.
Yeah.
Wanda with brown hair supremacy, and I'll put that on my tombstone.
Age of Ultron's actually next on my list. It's gone up for me. It's one of the most underrated MCU movies because most people are like, oh, Age of Ultron sucks. I don't like Ultron as a villain. But when it comes down to it, you get some damn good scenes in there where Wanda's playing mind games on the main Avengers, and it foreshadows events that would come to fruition later in the MCU. It makes us rethink the way the characters feel about themselves. I think Ultron's a really solid villain. Not the best. Age of Ultron's a really fun time. It has a great rewatch value.
I also really like Quicksilver.
Yeah, Quicksilver, gone too soon. He wasn't quick enough, but hey, Age of Ultron, slept on.
Next for me is Black Panther. I do really like this movie. I realized I liked it a little bit more after I had kind of recently rewatched it. It's not necessarily the most rewatchable movie for me. I do really like the relationship between T'Challa and Nakia. I love them. I think they're one of the most underrated MCU couples. I love Shuri. I think she's funny. She's like a good kind of humor to me in the MCU, where I tend to have an issue with a lot of the humor in the MCU.
Yeah.
And I think it might honestly just be the accent that makes her delivery like better, because if any other character ever said, "What are those?" I would have been like, that's the worst thing I've ever heard in my entire life. But it's funny when she does it. I don't like Killmonger. I don't like the way Michael B. Jordan acts. I'm sorry. No one in the world ever agrees with me, and it's fine. It's just me.
Next up for me is Black Widow, which might be higher than some of you think it should be, but it's just my list. I like this movie quite a bit. I watched it 3 times. I wouldn't have watched it 3 times if I didn't enjoy it. Yelena, I'm sorry, she stole the show. She did. I can't wait to see Florence Pugh return in Hawkeye and hopefully future MCU projects. Just the family dynamic as well with Alexei and Melina and all these other characters. It worked for me. It was a heartwarming movie at times. Admittedly, Taskmaster is a garbage villain and what they did is unforgivable. And Dreykov was terrible too, so it doesn't have great villains.
She's not the villain. She's a victim. Okay.
Yeah. The villains aren't good, but the movie has so much heart and it's got fun moments that I do enjoy it. And it is a great send-off for Nat. We'll miss her in the MCU.
Next up for me is Ant-Man. I love Ant-Man. I've watched Ant-Man a couple times. Great movie. Scott and Hope are my favorite overall MCU couple. I'm a big romance person, and I think that's why I like the TASM movies the most out of all the Spider-Man movies. I love romance.
Next up for me is Captain America the First Avenger. Now, I like this movie a lot. I remember vividly seeing it in theaters with a group of friends back in 2011. I'll insert a picture here. Captain America the First Avenger is a really good origin movie for Cap. And I think we get a lot of cool World War II sequences. I do wish we got to see more of him fighting in World War II, though. I would be lying if I said I wasn't, because those are some of the coolest scenes, and they montage through them at times, which I know people complain about. I wish we got a little more of the World War II stuff. But Red Skull as a villain, arguably the most one-dimensional villain of all time. He literally just wants world domination and to take over the world.
Don't we all?
No. I will say, damn good ending. When I was a kid and I first watched this movie, it upset me because I was like, he didn't get the dance. But by the time... but by the time you see Endgame, it all pays off. Very clever way of tying it into the current day as well. So I'm a fan of Captain America the First Avenger. Like, from here on out, they're all really damn good movies.
Next up for me is Black Widow. Yelena quickly became my favorite female character.
Awesome.
I wasn't necessarily excited for Black Widow in the first place because I've never been the biggest Natasha stan. I just identify more with Yelena. I love Alexei in this movie. The humor in Black Widow is good. I'm a big fan of the fist fighting, down to earth side of Marvel.
Yeah.
And so I like this movie quite a lot.
So next up for me is going to be Ant-Man. Now, this is one of the most fun, original ideas in the MCU that I didn't think was going to work. I saw this at a drive-in movie theater and I was like, I guess I'll see it. At the time, I wasn't as hyped on it. I ended up really enjoying it. It's got cool heist vibes to it. Paul Rudd ages like fine wine, and seeing that man act in the MCU, it's a dream come true, honestly. I will say the villain is actually passable, surprisingly, for an Ant-Man movie. Yellow Jacket is okay. Still not the greatest, but better than I thought it could have been. And I love Hank Pym as a character. Plus, Luis is awesome. We need to see him summarize the entire MCU. I've seen that on Twitter and TikTok. It needs to happen.
My number 11 is Spider-Man Homecoming. I love this movie. For a while, was my favorite Spider-Man movie, I think. I like Vulture a lot as a villain. I think he's great.
Top tier.
The twist in that movie is great. This was the first Marvel movie I have memory of seeing in theater.
This is the first one we saw while we were dating. But it's funny you mention it. My number 10 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Now we're getting into the best of the best for the MCU. The reason this movie is so high, though, is because of Michael Keaton's Vulture. I will get on a pedestal and praise this man as the number 2 MCU villain all day. One of the best twists in the MCU. When he opens that door, I'll never forget the way we looked at each other in the theater. Shocked. You must be Peter. And it's just like, oh my God, what? I think it's so nice and refreshing to see Tom Holland take on the role of Peter Parker because he's just a lot younger. He's got that youthfulness to him that the other two don't because they're, a lot older playing down younger. It's a blast of a movie. It's got coming of age vibes. Give it to me.
My number 10 is Captain America: The First Avenger. I love this movie so much. For a while, like before I really got into the MCU, I remember just based off the movies I had seen, my go-to was, oh yeah, Captain America is my favorite Marvel character. And then when I got serious about the MCU, on my rewatch, watching with Chris, that changed very quickly to Bucky. Bucky is the best part of the Captain America movies for me. I love the 40s and I love the vibes of the 40s. And so I love this movie.
So number 9 for me is the movie that I've not talked down on lately, but definitely do think it's a little overrated despite the fact that I enjoy it quite a bit, and that is Thor Ragnarok. This is a movie that is one of the funnier in the MCU. Taika Waititi is having a blast directing it. A lot of improv in this movie, and it's great to see Thor's character change. This made him a fan favorite, I would say, and of course I love seeing him show down against Hulk in that scene. That's hilarious. And the final act is badass when Immigrant Song plays as well. Hela enhances this movie. She's an awesome villain. It's just a little overhyped in my opinion.
It can be a little overwhelming. It's a very overstimulating movie.
A lot of it is just meandering, and that's kind of the improv nature of it, but they're literally just trying to figure out how to get off this planet, and that's most of the movie. So it feels a little different, but I guess that's not a bad thing.
Next for me is Iron Man.
Okay.
Hey, it's still top 10.
I know.
And I'm not the biggest Iron Man fan. Like, I'm really not. Like, movie-wise. But there's just that feeling you get when you watch the first Iron Man, because it's the first Marvel movie.
Yeah.
You can't disrespect it.
Coming in at number 8 for me is going to be... drumroll, please. The first Avengers movie. I have so much nostalgia for this movie. It is one of the GOAT MCU movies. I saw it multiple times in theaters. Loki as a villain in it, I think he's perfect. And it's the first time we get to see this camaraderie and this massive team up on screen. Genius billionaire playboy philanthropist. The final battle of New York is one of the most iconic moments in the MCU. A lot of people say this movie's dated. It still deserves all the respect that it gets.
My number 8 is Thor Ragnarok.
Okay.
It was higher for the longest time. I decided to drop it after Shang-Chi. After sitting on it for a while and really, really thinking about it, yes, this movie did great things for Thor, and it is a good movie. It's just like the humor is really slapstick. Some of it's funny, some of it's not. It kind of does feel a little bit inconsistent to the characters, if I'm being honest. Not in a bad way. Like, I hope they keep going in the direction that they went in Ragnarok, because it's better than the track that Thor and Loki were on. But it's good. It's just overrated.
So next up for me is Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and this is an absolutely last-minute audible. I've thought about this a lot lately, and I've put this movie way higher than I personally think it should be, just because I feel like I have to cater to society and people, and it's a really good movie, don't get me wrong, but as someone who's not the biggest Captain America fan, it's just not one of my favorites. The action, absolutely badass. Is it revolutionary? Not really, though. We get a really cool highway fight scene with the knife. The opening on the boat is badass, and the Russo brothers come in and direct the hell out of this movie. But when it boils down to it, it's just another good MCU movie. It's not the best thing ever. It's really solid. It's top 10. I will say seeing Bucky is cool in this. I like that aspect of it. I feel like this movie's always been so highly rated, and I understand it, but honestly at the same time I don't understand it. I think that, yes, it's different than what we had seen at that point in the MCU, so I get why people were praising it. But even when I saw it in theaters, I was like, oh, that was awesome. But at the time I was like, that's not my favorite MCU movie. It's still really good. It's top 10, but it is not in my top 5. I had to come clean to say that.
Fair. Overrated doesn't always mean bad.
Right.
I wanted to say that when I talked about Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Just because something's overrated doesn't mean it's bad. Next for me is The Avengers. Great movie. Love it. There's lots of iconic lines that came out of this movie. He's my brother. He killed 80 people in 2 days. He's adopted. It's a classic.
So next up for me is going to be Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, the newly released Marvel movie. This movie is freaking badass. See it on the biggest screen possible. If you have not seen it, Simu Liu. here to stay. Absolutely love him in the role as Shang-Chi. His duo with Katie is one of the funniest duos in the MCU and one of the best duos in the MCU. The villain in this movie is awesome and arguably one of the better villains in the MCU. It's just such unique, creative storytelling. I loved everything about it, and I'm going to try and see it as much as I can in theaters. Check out our spoiler review and non-spoiler review, which will be linked up above and down below. You don't want to miss this movie on the big screen. Go support Shang-Chi. It rocks.
Next for me is the one movie that makes our top 10 different, Doctor Strange.
Wow.
I love Doctor Strange as a character, and I love his movie. I don't watch it all that often. I don't, but I do love his movie. What Doctor Strange is, like that whole concept with like the Ancient One and stuff, I think is really cool. And I like the visuals of this movie. I see myself a little bit in Doctor Strange. I've been the most excited for Multiverse of Madness to come out, and I'm still so excited.
So before we give you guys our top 5, hit that like button, comment your ranking down below, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. So number 5 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy. I will never forget seeing this movie in theaters. It looked so wacky from the trailers, but when I sat down and saw it with my friends, we fell in love with it. I listen to the soundtrack all the time. I've been listening to it a lot more recently. It's just a space family that I never knew I needed in this other side of the MCU that I fell in love with. It's a classic in my eyes that everyone pretty much loves.
My number 5 is Shang-Chi. The humor in this movie is the perfect kind of humor for me. If you can't tell by this entire video, I am like very specific on my humor, and if the humor doesn't hit for me, then it doesn't hit, but it hits in Shang-Chi. Simu Liu is so funny. Awkwafina is so funny. They're great together. Their chemistry together is awesome.
Yeah.
And I literally can't wait to see them again.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be counting down the days until I know I'll be able to see them.
I echo everything you just said there. I love Shang-Chi. Coming in at number 4 for me is going to be Captain America Civil War. I remember seeing this movie twice in the same day the weekend it came out because I freaking love it so much. Just the conflict between Iron Man and Cap and seeing the Avengers being torn apart. Shout out Zemo because he's honestly one of the more slept on villains in the MCU. His plan worked and he's not given enough credit just because he's not as menacing of a presence. It's all up here. He's a very clever villain who tears the Avengers apart. We get introduced to Black Panther and Spider-Man in this movie. It gives us some of the best action from the airport battle to the final showdown. By the way, Team Iron Man, I don't care.
My number 4 is Avengers Endgame. Kind of a hot take maybe. I don't know. Just the more I watch it, the more the humor. Not for me. I'm not the biggest War Machine fan. Rhodey, specifically in Endgame, really lost me. Like, nothing he said made me laugh. Really honestly annoyed me, if I'm gonna be straight up with you. There's just lots of jokes that I just didn't like. Hulk dabbing, the jokes about the tacos, like, instead of having all of that, I'd much rather have a 5-minute scene of Steve telling Bucky that he's going back to the 40s, which is something that was confirmed that they had, but we don't get to see that on screen. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's more character moments we could have gotten in Endgame instead of joking, slapstick humor, which it's not my thing. But because it's Endgame, because I could watch it from Portals and onwards, and I cry every time I watch it, like, it is a good movie. It's just, like, the in-between where it's like,
Coming in at number 3 for me is going to be the one that started it all, Iron Man. This is a movie that I hold near and dear to my heart. I remember coming home from school every day in 4th grade and watching it for a whole entire week on DVD. Had my routine down pat. I absolutely love this one. RDJ's Iron Man is arguably the greatest comic book movie casting of all time, and I really wouldn't be in love with the MCU if it weren't for this movie. I have to give it all that credit. It's one of the more rewatchable. I think Obadiah Stane is an underrated villain in the MCU, and it's just a perfect movie pretty much in my eyes that I will always cherish. And by the way, Terrence Howard's a better Rhodey. I don't care what anyone says. Next time, baby.
My number 3 is Civil War. I say this all the time. Bucky is the catalyst for the entire MCU, and I will die on that hill. I really will. I love seeing Team Cap versus Team Iron Man. I'm Team Cap personally, but obviously I'm gonna be Team Cap because Bucky and Sam are Team Cap, and Bucky and Sam are my 2 favorite characters. I love Civil War because it gave me Bucky and Sam, which gave me Falcon Winter Soldier. If we included the TV shows in this, the Falcon Winter Soldier is in my top 5. I don't care. Do not care. I love this movie.
So coming in at number 2 for me, this is basically where I wish I could count the entire thing as one big movie and cheat, but I can't do that. So if I'm splitting them into the parts that they were released in, number 2 for me is Avengers Endgame. Now this was my number 1 for the longest time, and it took a lot for me to put it at number 2. It is the perfect 3-act structure, despite what anyone says. I've said this multiple times, this exact phrase. The first hour is the falling out and then recovering and figuring everything out. The middle act is the time heist, fan service moment where we figure everything out. And the last hour is the epic battle we'd all been waiting for. Perfectly structured. I really don't have anything else to say about this movie. You guys know my thoughts on it. It's a perfect conclusion to the Infinity Saga, even though Far From Home is still in the Infinity Saga. This movie's amazing, 5 out of 5.
My number 2 is Infinity War.
Okay.
I love Infinity War so much. I think out of Infinity War versus Endgame, I definitely think it's better. Probably because they're not all snapped and stuff, so you get to see all the characters. I love movie Wanda. I said that earlier, and I specify movie Wanda because I'm not the biggest WandaVision fan. But I love her in Infinity War. I think she's great, and I love seeing them all team up in Wakanda.
It's a damn good movie. It's my number one. Avengers Infinity War is my favorite MCU movie. It took me a while to come to this conclusion, but I realized the moment I had in theaters watching this compared to Endgame, while Endgame is the best conclusion, this is a movie I think just hit me differently. Shock value when they snap everyone away, the villain wins. It's just a damn rewatchable movie.
I remember watching it in theaters, and because Bucky is the first one that snaps away, I legitimately thought that he died. But then like Black Panther and like Spider-Man does it, and I was like, I'm good. We're good.
Yeah, the villain wins in the movie. It's perfect. And it's honestly, I would put Infinity War Endgame as one big movie at my number one, but I had to split them into two, and I'll take part one over part two by that much. What's your number one?
My number one, it's shocking. I know. It's Captain America, the Winter Soldier. I love the action in this movie. I think the humor is funny. I love Black Widow in this movie. And I love Bucky in this movie.
Yeah.
I think he's great. I genuinely do think that Bucky is what makes all of the Captain America movies interesting. He just simply is. And I think he's one of the best villains.
So that's going to do it for our ranking of all 25 MCU movies, including Shang-Chi. Definitely hit the like button. Comment your ranking down below. We want to have a discussion down there. Drop all your hot takes. Do you think we had hot takes? Let us know. Follow Cam on all her social medias. They are linked down below. Subscribe to her YouTube channel where you can see the video version of the Unusual Couple podcast, as well as on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that good stuff. We got new episodes coming very soon. Thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already and hit the notification bell. Got a ton of MCU videos coming out this weekend. You're all the best. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.